David, thanks so much for being on Wall Street Unplugged.
Really happy to be here. This is just great.
Well, a lot to cover, right? Because I'll be honest with you, before my buddy Jeff Phillips introduced me to you, I knew very little about the helium market. And just talking to you, your team, and seeing how engulfed you are in this and your experience, I guess let's start there to bring everybody in and go over maybe your background, like a 30-plus-year background, and what made you choose helium? Because, you know, I've seen that you work for some of the largest companies in the world out there, and to really focus on this market, that's something that interests me at maybe investing in your company.
Well, like everyone, I've had a great career. It's been a tremendous journey. I started out with Shell Canada Resources Limited here in Calgary. I am a Calgary boy. But then I went to ExxonMobil in Houston, down in the States, and pretty much explored oil and gas around the world with them. Came back to Calgary with Husky Energy, was building Frontier and International with Husky Energy, and moved on from there, did my own startup. People did well out of that. I worked for a private company for a while. And then I went to Kuwait for a short period of time, and for about 4 years, really enjoyed my time in Kuwait with both the KOC and with Cufbeck, their international group. Came back to Calgary in the downturn. And so helium, that's part of the journey. And met with a good friend of mine who has a company called Petrel Robertson, and they're a consulting company here in Canada. But part of what they've done is recognized good ideas and figured out, okay, well, you know, where's the market going, and could this be a venture? And new ideas need a place to nurture and grow before we can actually generate seed capital. So I came on inside Petrel Robertson at that point in time and helped build the helium idea inside the company and build it forward and begin to build sort of the seed staff around it. And that's how we got into helium. We noticed that what had happened with the BLM and the notice in 2012, 2013, that's when Petrel Robertson had first started looking at helium. But it was really as the market began to turn and as we began to watch the reserve base go down with the BLM, so they were coming to the end of their time, you know, the resources were going to be needed by the market. That's when we really began to build out Imperial Helium and looking for helium resources and building a strategic database that we could build from to go forward.
Now, let's get into helium, because I think most people believe that, hey, helium, blimps, balloons, right? That's normal. Yet, right. You know, rare high value commodity here that we're talking about, that is, you know, you say in your presentation, it is abundant, but rarely found economic quantities on Earth. Go through some of these cases, because for me to invest in a company, I get pitched a lot. And after speaking to you and learning so much about this industry, especially how it has ties to the semiconductor industry, which is growing enormously and will grow enormously with new technologies, talk about that. This way, I think you're going to educate a lot of people when you do, because you definitely educated me.
Okay. So helium, abundant in the universe, but rare in concentration on Earth. And where helium comes from is it's generated in the Earth and from the crust, and basically an alpha particle goes out from uranium. It grabs 2 electrons, it becomes helium, and then it migrates upward. And it just keeps on migrating up because it is the lightest, second lightest element. And as it migrates upward, it bumps into hydrocarbons, and it occasionally gets trapped with hydrocarbons, or there are other places where it gets trapped with dominantly nitrogen and CO2 and other gases. But it's trapped in the Earth the same way oil and gas is trapped in the Earth. Helium as a substance, though, has amazing uses industrially. So about 30% of it is used for making pure environments. If you want to manufacture something and you don't want to have air or other things cause contamination in the space, then what you'll do is you will basically use helium to flood that space. So microchip manufacturing, can't do it without it. Fiber optics, can't do it without it. A lot of unique research can't be done without it. And that's sort of its second major application. About 21% of it gets used for research. And helium, so helium, it is the last thing to become a liquid. And as a liquid, it actually can be frictionless. So you can create a pure environment that is frictionless and won't react with anything for doing experiments in. Huge. just really important for research, but also important for the medical industry. So HELOX you'll see a lot around HELOX at this point in time. And what that is helium is used in mixture with air, so it reduces the viscosity and the drag in a person's lungs so they can breathe easy. So people with COPD or people that have challenges as an outcome of COVID, these are places where helium will wind up getting more use. Then about 21% of it gets used for cooling. Now, helium as a gas has the ability to take on a lot of energy and heat in the form of heat, so it can store heat. But then it also is very good at dissipating heat, which means it's really, really good for cooling. So every MRI machine in the world, it uses helium. And then other things, there are blimps and balloons, of course, they're around. But helium is also the smallest molecule. So it can be used for detecting leaks when you're commissioning a plant, or, building things that have to be tight. So those are the major uses of helium out there.
Yeah, and David, I have to say I appreciate it because I know your 35 years of experience at working at Shell, ExxonMobil, Kuwait Oil Company and stuff. You can get on a podium and just say, hey, we're developing oil and natural gas, and you're not going to get these questions. But when it comes to helium, I could picture you telling this story a lot. So
I'm happy to answer.
No, and I appreciate that. So the more people I think understand it, the more they're going to realize why this is an amazing market. And there's not a lot of larger players in this market, right? It seems like it's defined by just a few companies. Why is that? There's no spot market for this, I don't think. So, when you look at commodities and things like that, nobody talks about it. But this is an incredible market that I feel like could be easily penetrated if you have the right management team.
Well, helium is a commodity. It basically grew up out of Texas, where the dominant resources were, and the dominant resources were held by the government, and so there were public sales. So the Bureau of Land Management made these public sales, and the price of helium stayed low for a long period of time. And then out of that, 4 major companies grew up dominating the market space. And this is Praxair, Air Liquide, Lind, and Air Products. Really, 80 to 85% of the global market, because the helium market grew out of the United States and is just building out into the international market now. The government realized in 2013 that they wouldn't have enough resources to supply the whole world. So they brought in a Stewardship Act and said, okay, we're going to stop selling helium to the world around 2018 or so. 2020 will be finished. Well, the reserves hit their limits at 2018, and then the last sale for helium occurred. And that took 2.1 billion cubic feet off the market out of a 6 billion cubic foot market. So a huge chunk of the market was removed at that point in time. Now, there are other players that are in there as well. There's essentially Matheson, and there's Awatani and Uniper. They're trying to build into the market space. So there is competition in the marketplace. And at that last BLM sale, the price took off. It went from about $150 for 1,000 cubic feet to over $337 for 1,000 cubic feet. So in contrast, think about that for a moment. Gas sells for like $2 to $3 for 1,000 cubic feet. Helium sells for $300 for 1,000 cubic feet, and that's for raw helium. Refined helium, which is what's used for many things, pure prices for pure helium, which is 99.999% pure, can be as high as $600, $650 for 1,000 cubic feet. So there's this huge value for helium. Small commodity, huge value because of the importance of its uses. Right. You have another question in there?
Yeah, no. And this is great stuff because, when I'm looking at the scale of this opportunity and how far you could take this, because one of the things I learned is, when it comes to investing in smaller junior companies, you're going to see, you always have exploration risk. Anyone that gives you a time frame, you're always going to pretty much double it, right? But this is a different way to explore this. Why don't you talk about that and bring everybody in, because it seems like it's a lot easier where you go into places where natural gas is already discovered. Yeah. If you can go over that process, that to me, that's attractive, where that's always a major risk with junior miners and the amount of money that they're spending. But this development process and getting to the exploration phase is a lot quicker than what you would see in almost anything: gold, natural gas, oil.
Yeah, so we've taken an approach which we believe is an efficient approach for the use of capital, of our investors' capital. And it also reduces risk significantly. And this is really where we differentiate ourselves a little bit. So in Western Canada, we have public databases. And the public databases basically mean you can drill a well, and after 2 years, they become public. And with that database of wells, there's 650,000 wells in Western Canada. Now, 189,000 of those actually have gas analyses, so we know where the helium is. So we don't have to explore for it or guess or have the idea kind of where it is. We know where it is. Now, a lot of these are depleted, and they're indicators of where we can go. So the map that you're seeing there has 2,000. Those 2,000 dots are where helium is greater than 0.5%. And where the star is where Imperial Helium has identified an asset. And this is a great story. This is a great asset. But what we're doing is we're finding it where it's already been found. And in our case, the asset was found in the 1940s, and it was a blowout. It was a huge blowout. It blew out for 100 days at 50 million cubic feet a day. It was in the middle of the winter. It was, cold. There was very little ice in any of the gas. So we have this dry gas producing out, and everyone thought it was going to explode, but it never did. And the reason it didn't explode is because when they finally got the well under control and did a proper test, they did an analysis on the gas, and it was 0.63% helium, 8% CO2, 3.5% methane, and the rest was nitrogen. So it wouldn't explode. It was just, it's not flammable with that little amount of methane. So everyone was very disappointed there wasn't a gas well in the 1940s, but it was also the war years in Canada. So helium was hugely important for listing. They looked at it to see if it was going to be concentrated enough at that point in time to make it economic to produce, and it wasn't. They needed to meet a 1% threshold, so they closed this thing up and walked away. Now, the structure itself is a big basement structure, and you can see this on seismic. And geologists from 1940 onwards came across this big structure. They drilled the structure in 1947. They drilled it in 56. They drilled it, I think it was in 69, and the last one was in 74. So this structure has been drilled multiple times. So we know what the stratigraphy is across the structure. We know what the reservoir looks across the structure. So what we've done is we're appraising the asset. It's already been found. The helium's there. The reservoir's there. There's gas that's proven that will come out of the ground. What we're doing is we're confirming the helium, and we're confirming the production rate. And that's what we're doing right now. We're in the process of drilling the structure, completing our second well, and completing our first production test. And I'll be bringing news of that to the market probably in the next week or so.
So this is fantastic. So we're talking about, finding asset drilling results. Let's put this in perspective for people who don't know your company. So Imperial Helium, you just went public. You put together the management team. This is in May. For full disclosure, I was in the financing. And now you just went public in May. All this is coming together. When I see something like this, it's happening a lot quicker than I thought. It seems like, I don't know if that's the experience of your management team. I don't know if it's because it's helium. And again, I'm comparing you to other commodities and other juniors and search for other commodities. But putting this together so fast, I mean, is this how easy? I don't want to say easy because nothing's ever easy, but just to get these assets, it seems like, you just, going full throttle here. But the advancements that I've seen in just the first couple of months is pretty amazing. And I don't know if you're setting high expectations up for yourself or not, but it is pretty impressive.
Well, there are a combination of factors here that make the difference. First off, we're in the Western Canada Basin where we're used to drilling oil and gas. And so all the infrastructure and all the pieces that we need to do the kind of exploration we're doing are already here. Another piece, we have an experienced management team. There's myself. I have 35 years of experience. My COO is an engineer with about 45 years of experience. My senior geoscientist is about 25 years of experience. I've got another senior geophysicist who's about he's about 35 years of experience as well. So we have this mature management team that knows where the assets are. We know what we're doing, and we know what we're going after and why we're going after it. So it was easy for us to be ready and to be ready to move into motion as we got the funding put forward. So in 2020, we went out for our seed round, and with our seed round, $750,000, we essentially captured our first asset. And then we got the first asset moving. We realized it was much bigger than we initially had thought. So we did initial funding to raise more capital so that we could capture the whole area. The structure is over 95 square miles in area. It's a big structure. So we have captured all the land across that structure. Having captured the land, the next steps are really clear. We don't have, there is seismic out there, but it's already been shot. We've acquired that. We've looked at it and analyzed. It confirmed the best locations for us to go, but the structure is well defined. We knew that it was there. So it was really picking the optimum spots and then getting after drilling it. The industry is in a place where, they're looking for work these days. And so we were able to quickly secure some rigs, get them out there and drill our assets, and then quickly moved into production testing. So this is actually sort of a normal pace that you could go at. There are other assets around that we're looking at. So as we look forward into where we are now, really, we'll finish up the work that we're doing right now this summer, the drilling, the testing by the end of September. And then in October, we'll move forward into a third-party resource assessment. And just to think about this a little bit differently, in an oil and gas sense, if you wanted to have a reserve or a bankable asset, you would have to have both a third-party resource assessment and an offtake agreement. And that's where we're going. We're going to get an offtake agreement lined up as well, hopefully by the end of the year, so that by the end of the year, we have something that is really a reserve. We will have established the volumes. We will have established producibility. We'll have established that we can create 5,9 helium, and we will have established an offtake agreement. And that will really take us to the place where we have what would be called a reserve. So we're sort of in full bore mode and moving forward. And then 2022, as we move forward into 2022, that's when we'll move forward for the development of the field. So these first two wells that we're drilling, they'll become producing wells. And we'll tie them into our first plant, and that will begin the development of the field. Now, the field is too big to deliver with just two wells. So we're going to have to drill more wells. So there'll be probably 2 more appraisal wells and then 4 more development wells, something on that scope to develop the whole field.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Then we'll build the plant and get that moving forward at that point in time, the larger plant.
Yeah, and I was bringing up the, for those of you watching on YouTube, the 12-month milestones and how already, subsequent lease payment in May, acquired 3D seismic over your asset in June 29th, commence work pro drilling. I mean, you're just meeting all of these and everything seems like it's happening so quickly. I guess, my question as well is probably people who are going to invest in this stocks. So now that you have this, you have the asset, it seems like you have a lot of assets to go after too. You have the right management team. I know you guys live and breathe helium, like everything helium when I talk to your management team. And I love that. It's
our
not
voice
like,
is a little higher some days.
I can't tell you how many guys I talked to about oil and they're like, Frank, I got this biotech company you're interested in. You guys are just all engulfed in this 100% in. I can know anything just by talking to you. What is the next steps here? What can investors look for? I mean, we see that the 12-month milestones that I just put up where, scale up, commission a pilot project in the field that's happening second half, but let's go out like 2023, 24, 25. I mean, it seems like demand is going to be even stronger. Yeah. How are you going to take advantage? How do you really turn this into a, for some companies, and it's okay if you're junior miner, the way you look for, hey, I just want to explore this asset a little bit and just, make it look really prime this way I could sell it. I mean, you guys are looking to explore this thing. Is it, hey, we want to become an industry leader? What's the future say 3 years out from now?
Okay, so there's a couple components to that, but the future 3 to 5 years for us is all growth. That's really where we are. So in terms of the growth mode, in 3 to 5 years, the Steveville asset itself will be fully developed and we'll be generating the revenue from that. We will have taken some of the revenue already because we'll have the first pilot plant gets on in 2022. We have our first production. The full field gets developed. Then the whole field will be on production. So the revenue stream will climb up significantly with that. That revenue will get put back into new assets. So the company begins to look or operating in its mechanics like a resource company that's producing gas. So I build a reserve and then I begin to deplete my reserve. My value is in my reserve and my production rate, but you need to know what's going to come next to replace that reserve. So it's the next assets that come along that are important. So the cash flow will go into capturing the next asset and building that reserve pile as a whole. So we'll build the reserves and the company as a whole will be in growth mode, and it'll be strongly in growth mode at that point in time. And when we think about what's going on with the market, there's a bunch of things going on with the market. And I should have mentioned this when we asked about the supply and demand side. Globally right now, there's a lot going on. You're hearing about, okay, there's this big helium project in Russia, Ammer, that's going to bring on the BCFs of helium, and Qatar has its next stream coming on, and it's going to bring on BCFs of helium. So the other side of the story here is that helium as a commodity is perishable. And that's because it gets transported as a liquid. And to be a liquid, it has to be lowered to minus 272 degrees. So that's like 1.5 degrees above absolute zero, which means there's nothing else in it. It is absolutely pure helium. It gets put in something called an ISO container. You can go to the Lind website and look this up. An ISO container has about a 42-day shelf life, so 7 weeks. And it's in something that's about the size of a sea can. And that's how helium is transported. It's transported as a liquid in something the size of a sea can. So it goes on a container ship. Now, there aren't ships full of helium. It goes on a ship of opportunity. So it's a container ship that takes the helium to its next place. Now, it only has 7 weeks before that container begins to vent the helium. So you can see it's a perishable commodity. You have to actually use the helium. The end result of that is that the market begins to act more like the liquid natural gas market. There's no way to efficiently store large volumes of helium, so you have to use them, which means there's localization of the market. So that's why the price of gas is $10 for liquid natural gas in Australia, is because they're selling to China. In Canada, we can't get $2 for our gas because the Permian Basin generates so much gas, it floods the market. And anything that China may need, you can't take it to China fast enough to make the price rise. So there's isolation of the marketplace. Same thing happens with helium. So in Canada, we're looking to sell into the United States. The United States is that 2.1 billion cubic feet. That's coming from abroad in tankers across in these ISO containers coming across. We're displacing part of that market. That's what we're looking to do. So there is this short-term demand for helium, which should ensure a higher price for helium, and the price will stay high. So we're building into a market, into that higher price market. We're building our asset as the market remains high, and that's what we're doing.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you for explaining that, because I didn't know some of that stuff either, but it does make sense, right? I mean, if it is, I didn't know it was 7 days, basically 7 days shelf
7 weeks.
Life. Oh, 7 weeks.
7 weeks
shelf life.
7 weeks shelf life. Yeah,
I know just thinking about shipping that someplace and it has to be used. That's incredible, and being able to cut that market.
Oh yeah, no, we've talked to people in there. They were like, some of our gas off-taker buddies that we've spoken with. They're sort of like, yeah, well, my ship went out and it was supposed to go to Hong Kong, but it got rerouted to Taiwan, and now I have to get my container back. And you're thinking 7 weeks, and it's going to go. It's got to be a week or two here and there. Someone's got to be concerned about that.
Even now, shipping delays we've seen all over the place, right? I mean, that kills it, right? So that's incredible. So okay, so here's your stock, Imperial Helium. You trade on Toronto Venture. It's just again, you just came out in May. Really, really great stuff. And I have to tell you, and that symbol is IHC, guys. From someone that's travels the world, try to find the best stories. This really is an incredible story to see a management team, especially if you're experienced 35 years again, with a background in Exxon, Shell, Kuwait Oil, and come together to go into helium. To me, that's very, very, very exciting. It's a market that I know a lot of people don't understand, so I appreciate you coming on and dialing it down. I think there's going to be a lot of people attract this. I was attracted to this. That's why I'm an investor, and I think you're going to be surprised at how many people do jump into this because this is exciting, and the fact that I think your management team, where you guys can work any way you want to really go all in on helium here, is very, very exciting.
Well, watch the news. Well, we hope to be delivering some exciting news here in the not too distant future.
All right, that sounds great. Thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully you can give us an update in a couple months.
Tremendous. Looking forward to it. That's great.
All right, take care.
Thanks a lot.